Hello everyone! That's right, I'm back. Anime reviewer 56,537. And today on Minor Masterpiece, we are going to be discussing Sentenced to Be a Hero.
Filling a coffin and dragging it back here.
Good question. I can explain. See, it looked real valuable, and then one thing led to another, as it does. So, anyway, I thought it might come in handy, and that's why I brought it along.
Idiot!
So, without further ado, I'm going to break down how exactly the scoring system works on Minor Masterpiece really quick. If you don't care, just skip a minute ahead and it's probably over, alright? So, we got 5 categories on Minor Masterpiece. Out of 20 points, you've got the beginning, which is worth 3 points. You've got the characters, which is worth 6 points, but it's divided into main character, the villains or antagonists, and the side characters, all each 2 points. And then you have story, which is out of 4. You have world building, which is out of 4. And then you have the ending category, which is out of 3 points, right? And for anybody asking why I do it out of 20 points, why not? It's just because I don't think 10 points is a satisfactory amount to really grade a series on. I usually like a bit more to really delve deep into the stories I'm reviewing. So without further ado, let's go on into the beginning category and talk about the fruit salad that everybody cares about. The hook, the premise, and is your main character interesting? Or really just your story interesting off the bat? So, first off, Sentenced to Be a Hero, we're in the trenches. The heroes. Or criminals, as we find out later, but they're kind of nice criminals, so like maybe they're okay. They are fighting fairies. And fairies are not your Zelda, you're like, hey, listen, or your Tinkerbells of the world. They are monsters corrupted by the demon lords, sent to kill you. Or really, I guess not really sent to kill you, it's more of like an instinct thing. But we start off with Dota, who has grave robbed a goddess, as everybody has done at least once in their life, and Xylo telling you why, hey, it's not cool to break the law. And, of course, they have to fight their way out of it. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought it was kind of a good way to start off a fast-paced movement. And also, the animation made it look really cool. The animation in this series is very good, I will say, but that is kind of where a lot of the budget went to, as we'll discuss later. So, overall, I think it has a great hook. The premise, very simple. In a world where demons have pushed humanity to the brink, they must deploy their heroes, a misfit group of criminals, who can no longer die, to help fight back against the ever-marching demon army. I think that's like, I mean, it's like kind of a simple premise, right? Because like, what does a demon army do? It's probably killing humans. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was cool. I liked heroes. I watched the Fate series. And so overall, I think the premise is pretty good too. As far as it interesting, or like the main character interesting, yes! The heroes, like I said, very much kind of like Fate. Also, a little bit like, you could disagree, but it is Suicide Squad-y, right? Like a band of criminals coming together with like a self-destruct thing around their neck. I mean, I know Suicide Squad got the isekai anime or whatever, but they seem to have gotten a dark fantasy as well, so I think that's funny. I overall like the interestingness of this series as well. So I think it's good. It's a 3 out of 3 for the beginning category. Very nice, very quick and easy. Alright, so we're going to move on into the characters and talk about the main character, Xylo Forbarts. Am I saying that correctly? Maybe. I watched the dub and I still don't know. Anyways, Xylo, or Guts Light as I like to call him, is certainly a protagonist made for a dark fantasy, but his crime in particular is one that's misrepresented in court, which I think is fitting, because usually what you have with kind of a dark fantasy protagonist is they'll kind of be like a jaded, gloomy, I don't know, kind of look like just a actual terrible person, but then you find out they have a heart of gold and that their situation was heavily stacked against them, and it's the corruption of society that has really darkened their worldview, as it were. And so he is no different. Basically, what his crime is the fact that he was on a separate kind of unit of military something before he got turned into a hero, and they had a goddess before Tearita, which is the one you meet in this series. The one you meet in this series is Tearita. The one in his backstory is almost Tearita because they look so similar. And she dies to a demon blight corruption. She's gonna turn into a fairy essentially, and like Xylo has to kill her before she turns to the bad side, because if she turns to the bad side, she's bad, and then we have to kill her anyways. And so, basically, there's no way to cure it if it happens, right? And so then the church and the military are like, hey, why'd you kill a goddess? And he's like, it was the only way. And they're like, you're right, but we still don't like it. And so then they convict him of being, not convict him, of being a hero. They basically just charge him as a criminal, and they say, hey, you're either gonna die or you're gonna become a hero. And actually, you're just gonna become a hero because you're kind of like very useful on the battlefield. So, I think he is a great mold for a dark fantasy tale. The gimmicks being, obviously, the dark, brooding personality. He's popular with ladies, and he's a scrappy fighter. He has a ton of different weapons on his body. I like that they all explode. I thought that was neat. And he even enjoys poetry. He's a fan of Shakespeare. So, well read. But I think overall he is good. That being said, I do think, surprisingly, even with all of these traits, he does not have a lot of personality in the story, other than kind of being a more generic dark fantasy villain, or not villain, but dark fantasy protagonist, in the sense that, like, you can look at Guts, and arguably Guts had, like, a lot more time to develop the character, as you will. But even in the first arc, I would argue of Berserk, Guts shows more emotional complexity than Xylo does in the entire first season. Be that as it may. I guess in terms of like actual story, they're roughly around the same time period. So I would say Xylo is good. I just think he's a little bit of a hollow character, but overall he has the makings of a good protagonist. Therefore, I will give him a 1.5 out of 2. Next, we're going to talk about the villains. And of course, I'm going to be talking about the Demon Lords, just kind of in general. Then I'm going to go to Bujum, and then I'm going to go to Marlene, in a dark fantasy story, having the church, social hierarchy, kind of royals, right? And demons are not exactly unique things, right? You have the church probably being corrupt and power hungry. The royals, they're too busy making infinite amounts of money and eating infinite amounts of things, and that sucks for their people because their people do not have infinite amounts of money and are not eating anything usually, and so that means that they probably want to kill the royal family. And the demons usually just want to kill everybody just because. So I think that while those are not exactly original ideas for a fantasy story, I overall really enjoyed how Sims to Be a Hero tackled them. I like the fact that the demons, one, used the original take of what a fairy is from like European folklore, especially in, I believe, Irish? I may be wrong, but they are more evil and malevolent creatures that want to kill you rather than your kind of Disneyified versions of fairies, if you will. And so, overall, I like that we're kind of like taking a step back to what fairy originally means. And also, the demon forms are cool. I like that it range from giant bugs to little girls, which, if you don't watch anime, sounds kind of crazy. If you watch anime a lot like me, it's not a very crazy statement to make, is it? I think overall, I really enjoyed the Demon Lords. I like how they actually get the job done and kill people, instead of just like, sometimes stories make these all-powerful demons that can't kill anyone, and so I like the fact that the Demon Lords are actually like a real threat. Overall, really enjoy them. Bujum! Clear standout in this category, as he is a complex demon lord who not only enjoys poetry, like our main character, but also tries to learn and understand from humans, right? He even looks like one, kind of. His king entertains his rather fond take of humans and trying to learn from them. I don't know to what extent his king actually cares, but I do think that's kind of a threatening idea, because usually what happens with like overpowered, arrogant demon characters is the fact that they just don't care to understand humanity at all, and usually that arrogance eventually leads to their downfall because they underestimate them. So the fact that Bujum has taken a clear interest in understanding humans and trying to better himself from their ways kind of makes a more interesting case for demon lords in general and the king, because the king would not be as unprepared for a human comeback, as it were. So I overall really liked Bujum. I thought his blood doll hilariously looked like something out of Code Geass, like one of their mechs. thought Lelouch would jump out of the cockpit for that one. I really enjoyed it. And, of course, we're going to go on into Marlene, right? He's a twist villain, I guess. I mean, he's kind of a twist villain in the same way that Hans was in Frozen, where you kind of knew the entire movie that it was going to happen. Because he was just acting very suspicious since we first saw him in town. And the fact that Spriggan is hiding, which is the demon lord of, like, the arc that why the heroes are there in the first place. They're trying to find Spriggan, who is, like, a human. The fact that Spriggan was hiding out in the city in the first place suggests that someone in power within the city is kind of sheltering it to some extent, because if certain people go missing more frequently, somebody's gonna say something, and then somebody in power would have to suppress that information, right? Because I'm assuming Spriggan did not just go to that city and not kill anyone the entire time, and they were just, like, hanging out. I would assume Spriggan was killing people for, like, a while up to the point where the heroes get there, right? And also, I would say the final scenes with Marlene were amazing. The animation was through the roof, and it was a great climax to Kivia's character arc, which we'll talk a little bit more on later. But while I do think he is a cardboard cutouty character, and what do I mean by cardboard cutouty character? I mean a character that doesn't really, like, have a personality, and not in the same way that I was kind of getting on Xylo's case, because Xylo at least has personality traits. Marlene is quite literally just a priest Lee character. He doesn't really have anything else going for him, at least in the anime. Maybe in the manga he was more detailed, right? He is basically a character that is there to complete a function. That's what I mean by cardboard cutout. There is no greater depth to his character. He is pretty two-dimensional, as it were. Not really a three-dimensional character. But his function within the story is way better than the sum of his parts, and I can respect that for what his actions did to Kivia's character arc and made it amazing for a grand finale. So overall, I really enjoyed the villains in this season. Granted, I can't wait to see what the story can do with more time to develop, of course. So I would give the villains 2 out of 2. I think they were overall really great. So for side characters, we're going to kind of lightning around this. Because I'm talking about all of the heroes, Kivia and Teorita. So we kind of got like a lot to go through, so just bear with me a little bit here. If I screw up any of the names, I've never misspoke in my life. That's the correct pronunciation. The dub and everyone else is lying to you. I just know the actual information because me and the author talked and we're cool like that. So first off, we got Dodaluzulus. He's a fun guy, right? He steals things all the time, even if he doesn't need to. I like how they came back at the first battle to save the day with the giant bomb to blow up the bug dude after the Power of Friendship blast failed. And I think he has an interesting crime to go with him being a hero, which what you find out throughout the series is that most of the heroes' crimes kind of illuminate the corrupted nature of the hierarchy within the kingdom that they live in. So for Doda, basically there is a prince in the dungeon of the kingdom that he was put in, that he tried to help break out, that nobody in the courtroom acknowledged, and everybody thought he was crazy. And then after being convicted for that crime, and not his, like, countless thieving attempts, really. Or maybe he got convicted for the thieving attempts, but, like, seems like the whole prince thing was really what they were upset about. I enjoy how he was such a good thief the entire time, and he likes to steal things like alcohol for fun. Okay, so next, Viatum Leopold. I enjoy a good con man as much as any other person. I like a smooth talker, right? I think it was hilarious how he almost sold the royal palace to a circus, which grants the question, why was the circus wanting the royal palace in the first place? I guess it's just because of, like, the money inside the palace, you could say, like the value of, like, the kind of jewelry and everything and the artifacts. But I just feel like a circus is kind of weird clientele for that business transaction. But anyways, he gets sentenced to be a hero because of, not of his 1,000 crimes of basically fraud, it is because of a gossip article of all things about him trying to fearmonger society, saying that the demons were already corrupting the kingdom and that there were some in power and that there were these coexisters. And it all turned out to be true. And that's why they got into him. As Viatum says, I think he calls it second-rate slop he used to write for that article, and that's what did him in, hilariously enough. I think that's perfect for his character. I also think it's interesting that his seal in particular prevents him from telling the truth. I never really understood if that was just the truth in general, or the truth pertaining to the corrupted hierarchy of humans. I would assume that hierarchy of humans, because surely he hasn't just like lied the entire first season. I mean, he had to have told the truth at some point, right? But overall, really enjoyed him as well. Next, we got Norgal Sindrich. The fact that he believes himself to be the king of the Federated Kingdom is hilarious to me. I really loved his loyal subject spiel. It was one of those things where I thought I was going to get tired of it, but I never really did, because he's just an actual good ruler to his people who goes on the front lines and fights with them, rather than cowering in kind of a safe location, right? He is the last disciple of Sage Hordo, and he can tune seals, and he's really, really good at it. So, overall, I really enjoyed Norgal as well. Next, we've got Tatsuya. Not much to really say. I like that he's an example of the penalties of repeated resurrection, right? I also like how buff he got when he was kind of like strangling the plant demon lord or whatever. That was kind of fun. I just wonder how old he actually is, considering people do not know how long he's been there. He's been there since anyone can remember. So this leads me to my hot take theory. I think he is one of the original heroes that was summoned from another world using the first goddess's power, which, if you don't know, here's a quick explanation. The first goddess basically can summon heroes, and she originally did it from other worlds, but then because there was like a whole communication barrier and stuff, they stopped doing that, and then they opted for the current system, which is just resurrecting dead people all the time, right? And if you're curious on how the resurrection works, I believe it is basically they can resurrect any of the heroes from anybody's body. It does not have to be their own. I would assume most of them, because they've died and come back a few times, are not in their original body, quote unquote. Because I think all of them technically always look like this when they're resurrected. But anyways, back to Tatsuya, right? I think he's one of the original heroes that was summoned from another world. One, because nobody remembers when he was actually there. And two, because his name is distinctly Japanese. Nobody else on this list has a name that is distinctly Japanese. And since he speaks in gibberish, I wonder, because the first goddess's power works based on her remembering things. And she can get help from the ninth one, who is like the book one, to kind of remember people's lives and what they were like. But I wonder if the first goddess thinks Tatsuya is speaking gibberish because she can't understand Japanese. And therefore, when he is resurrected, he does not speak Japanese, he just speaks unintelligibly. Because that's what she understands him to do. So overall, I think Tatsuya is a good example of kind of the downside of resurrection, but also an interesting kind of piece of lore where I think he might be one of the original first heroes. So next we got Sav. I like his off-the-rails personality. It was amazing comedically, and it helped to promote the darker tone of the story. I also enjoyed how he just trauma dumps people. Like, at any point, if it's too quiet, he's just gonna keep rambling on and on, and he will probably just trauma bomb you. He introduces the concept of the Gwyn Mosa, which is an assassin group. I am curious, though, that considering humans are their clientele, would they fight on the side of humans to beat the demons? Or would they fight on the side of demons? Because if they fight on the side of humans, it makes sense because they want to preserve the people who are going to hire them to kill more people, right? And if they side for demons, I guess they just really like killing humans, which would also make sense, so I'm curious which way they're going to lean. I guess to the highest bidder, right? But overall, I really like Sav. Also, he does say that he's too nice to kill his targets, but considering he just immediately slashed off a person's hand and blew off that other guy's arm, I don't know how much I actually believe him. It could be completely true, but I still find his lack of hesitation when it comes to things of that nature interesting, to say the least. Next, we've got Jace Pateract? Jace, And not much on him yet, really. He is a dragoon who is into dragons. So, he's a dragooner. With his partner being a blue one that's called Neely. And he's strong and useful. So that's good. He also has a rivalry with Xylo. And his reason for becoming a hero is Jace's rebellion. Which we didn't get that much on it, other than it was a very big deal. And finally, the last hero, we've got Rhino, or Puck-Puka is his Demon Lord name, as he is a Demon Lord, right? It was a very interesting character reveal. I cannot wait to see what Rhino does in the story. I love his ideology, that pain and suffering should be shared equally among everyone. I think that is fascinating. I like that he kind of introduces this side of himself with just slowly killing Spriggan in the sewer, saying that he loves killing his own kind before he actually says that he is a demon lord. So you kind of like are getting little bits of hints throughout the speech as to like what he is. And you kind of got some earlier too in like the battle and everything. I also thought it was funny that he says that that trait is so common among their kind that they actually consider it a rather boring motive, talking about killing like his own species, which is demon lords. But when he was talking to humans, they thought it was a boring motive for somebody to want to kill someone of their own species. I thought that was hilarious. I cannot express how excited I am to see what this character does in the future. So, overall, I really enjoyed the heroes. Next, we're going to talk about Kivia. I think she has the best character arc. She goes through hating heroes and thinking they are expendable, to eventually respecting them, and then to becoming one at the very end with her killing Marlin and then being blamed for the crime and everything. So I thought it was an amazing conclusion to Season 1. I do have one negative with her character, and that's I don't exactly agree with her falling for Xylo, at least in Season 1, and I'm going to explain myself. The reason I don't think it makes much sense for her to kind of fall in love romantically with Xylo, which you can say whatever you will, like, oh, Carter, it was just a trope. She was so excited to play the scandalous wife whole day with Xylo being like the forbidden love interest, which was kind of already their dynamic with like her being the leader and him being a hero, and it's like a forbidden love thing. So I think there was definitely her kind of wanting to live out her fantasy there. But the reason I don't like it is because for her to kind of grow up in this atmosphere of thinking heroes are expendable, thinking they're scum, kind of like no good, evil criminals, it doesn't make much sense to me for over the course of a few battles, even though he did save her multiple times, to kind of go from hating to affection. Granted, I think it does make sense and would have been an amazing character arc if by the end of Season 1, she just respects them and sees them as equals. Which she kind of got there, but there was also the romance thing brought in. I really enjoyed the idea of her respecting the heroes. I think the romantic interest is a little weird considering she's a great character on her own. She does not need to be connected to Xylo to be a good character in the series. She is amazing by herself. And I think if you did want to do a romance, the fact that she is now kind of rock bottom, as it were, as a hero in society, then you can try and build the romance between Xylo and Kivia in the second season now. I just think it was a bit preemptive to do in the first season. But that being said, I loved her figuring out that Marlene was selling out the city to the demons because he was a coexister. She gave him kind of multiple chances to prove himself, and he kind of like failed multiple times, and then she eventually called him out on it. Easily the best character moment of the season, killing Marlene for her. Next, we're going to talk about I think I'm super excited for Teorita, right? I'm gonna be honest, I do not like Teorita. My negatives for the series really started to kick in when she became more and more important. Also, I want to kind of put this at the front of this analysis. If you enjoy certain characters and certain parts of the story that I personally do not, that's fine. That's like a taste thing, right? I'm just talking from a point of cohesion with the story, and personally, Wally characters are never my favorite. I don't think I've really enjoyed a single lolly character that much, and if I did, they probably had to have amazing character writing and not really rely on the tropes of the genre. So what do I mean? First off, I dislike the goddess trope in fantasy anime, usually. And the reason being is because they're either a big booty back pain goddess, or they're a lolly that acts like a child for the entire series. And in something like Sentenced to be a Hero, where you're trying to create a darker, more serious, more tension-heavy, realistic atmosphere, something like Terrorita can disrupt it in a way that makes it hard to tell the story that you want. And so to explain that, I'm going to talk about the concept of tension within a story, right? So usually what you want to do with tension, think of kind of a balloon that you're inflating. You want it to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you kind of want to sit at it almost about to explode, and then sometimes you want to let a little bit of air out of the balloon, and sometimes you want it to pop, depending on the situation that you want. Usually, a pop in the balloon is the villain actually wins, or the evil side somehow prevails against the main character, and it's shocking because there's no way that could have happened. How could we have lost? We were so overpowered and we had so much friendship. And another thing is usually the balloon deflates a little bit when the main character side wins, and you're like, oh, good, they did great, they saved the day. But usually for big climactic moments, you want the balloon to be almost popping, right? Terrorita kind of destroys the concept of tension within Sentenced to be a Hero, because not only does her joking personality with consistent need for praise and strange comedic timing throughout the entire series, like when she's feeling jealous of Kivia and Frenchie when they're battling over Xylo, and she wants to insert herself into that for some reason. She also has these get-out-of-jail free attacks, whether it be her AoE tool that's perfect for killing as many fairies that appear on screen so I never have to think they're an actual threat ever again, or she gets the powered-up Holy Blade move that kills basically anything the story needs it to, because the enemies will be like, oh no, they're about to do this amazing, big, powerful combo attack. What do? I'm going to make myself a bigger target and then charge straight at it. And so, first off, that's a terrible trope. That's the One Piece movie trope, and nobody likes it when the big villain makes the bigger version of themselves and then loses to Luffy's new move or whatever. She just creates conflict with the story's attempts at creating a darker tone, whether it be with Bujum, Rhino, or even Xylo himself, as he is a much more kind of dark, brooding character before meeting Terrorita. And I'm not saying he has to be dark and brooding forever, because obviously I want him to be happier. All characters should kind of learn to accept, move on, kind of grow past it. But the pace at which he did that for the trauma he had kind of makes it feel disingenuous and a little bit plot devicey, instead of a actual character emotional development within Xylo himself. Those moments feel way, way off in the series. So overall, I really liked a lot of the side characters, but because Terrorita is so important to the story with the whole goddess plot going on, and the fact that she's kind of the number 2 to Xylo, I think she negatively impacts the story, and she's not just bad, she's actively working against it. So I would argue that she takes the side characters category down to just 1 point. Next, we are going to talk about the story section, and this is out of 4 points, right? And I'm going to do this by talking about some pros and cons for the story overall. Pros, heroes. I loved them. I thought they were easily the best part of the series. Second, Kivia's character arc. Amazing start to finish. We loved it. Then we got Rhino's reveal, which was amazing. I truly loved it. And Bujum, because he survived, is going to be a very interesting repeat antagonist. And overall, I think the series does a good job of engaging the audience and kind of keeping attention up throughout the entire first season. So, as for the cons, I'm going to kind of illustrate with my handy-dandy notebook here. I know you missed it. It's okay, hold the applause. The main problem with the series, in my opinion, is how negatively the runtime impacts the series as a whole. So I have written out this handy dandy little graphic here for you. So first off, we have the first episode, which is about an hour, and then episodes 2 through 12 are kind of 20 to 22 minutes-ish. And so then we have overall probably a 15 to 16 episode series in terms of actual episode length, right? Which is a better way to measure runtime, because if you're just measuring one runtime by episode count, you can have a 8 episode series that each has 1 hour episodes, and technically that runtime would probably be about 24 episodes, right? So overall you have this, which is about 9 or 8 episodes less than average for a first season, which typically you're going to get a 24 episode first season for fantasy anime, especially because they need time to build their world, because the world is what actually sets them apart. Granted, you could argue that the characters set them apart. That's fair depending on the writing, but most of the time in fantasy anime, especially in dark fantasy anime, you're going to kind of see the same tropes and archetypes of characters over and over, but the world is kind of what you're more interested in and seeing how it factors in. And so when you shorten your series by about a third, essentially, that brings down the amount of time you can focus on character writing, brings down the amount of time you can focus on world building, and brings down the amount of time you can focus on story, right? So all of that time is now a premium, which is bad, because usually what ends up happening is that unless you have an incredibly tightly written story, you just kind of write a little bit mid at times, or sometimes bad. And that's not really the fault of the story, I'm going to assume, because I did not read the manga, I watched the anime. I'm thinking it's more of a cut content problem that the anime has adapting, right? And so that's really where the story starts to become a little bit shaky for me in this category. And what do I mean by that? Well, one, a place that we spent a lot of our time on that we probably shouldn't have was Teorita. She constantly clashes with the world's tone that the series clearly wants to establish with its character actions, which side on the more realistic and dark approach. Another con is that a lot of demon battles come down to a power friendship moment for some reason between Xylo and Teorita getting a big new move to beat the bad or demon. It's fine once, but you gotta start really mixing it up. But I get it because they don't really have the time to figure out a way to mix it up. The female characters are not necessarily as developed as I would like them to be. I think they just randomly get tropes like they're just in love with Xylo now. All of the female characters are infatuated with Xylo that are important, right? Like Kivia is, and arguably Frenchie makes sense because she's engaged to Xylo. That one completely makes sense. I'm fine with. That's an interesting character idea. I like the fact that she still wants to be engaged to Xylo and that she still wants to support him. I think that's very cool. Why is Teorita now interested in Xylo? And that one isn't so much a gripe with the character writing. It is still, but it's also, that's just really weird when you think about she looks like a child and she acts like a child. So kind of strange series. Also, another aspect of the writing that feels a little bit rushed. Xylo's trauma just gets pushed away after 2 fights with Teorita. He's just fine with using her now. For as big of a deal as it was to him in the beginning of the stories, that he was like, no, I'm not gonna use you. And then she's like, no, we have to save the day, we have to save people. And then he uses her once, and then that makes sense, right? Because it was a do or die moment. And then he's a little bit hesitant. Makes sense, I like that. The second time, he's still hesitant, uses her, and then he just keeps using her after that. He just doesn't care anymore. And we didn't get as much development on his old military team as I thought we needed to kind of show him getting over that past trauma. Additionally, a better way to write that would have been, instead of him getting over it basically a third or halfway through the series, make him get over it at the end of season 1 and give us more time to really get to know his character, as he is the main character. Seems very important. Another one, there is very little focus on the goddess element of this series, except at the very beginning when you meet Teorita and they start complaining about how it's a problem. You get to randomly see the poison goddess halfway through, And at the very end, when they explain how the heroes are summoned and everything, you get to see the guy and the book goddess, and they kind of tell you how the first one works, right? You need to put more time on that, considering Teorita is such an important character. And you can't say that it was talked about by Kivia just being like, hey, Teorita's important for like the first half of the series, because everybody was doing that. Overall, while there are some clear standout moments in the series, the disconnect between the premise, mood, and themes throughout the story, especially due to Teorita, and kind of the cut content within the series, seems more like a jerky old roller coaster than the smooth new ride I believe it's marketed to be because of the amazing animation, right? The difference between the tone of the very first episode, the hour-long special, and the last one is staggering in a way that doesn't feel like a developed series so much as kind of a we started here and now we're here, I guess. In a way that honestly kind of feels like false advertising. So overall, I would give the story section a 2 out of 4. I really just think you need to take more time with the series and really focus on what you want it to be. Do you want it to be a more realistic dark fantasy that is a very tension-heavy series? Or do you want it to have more isekai tropes with kind of a comedy aspect and Teorita? It's up to you. You just need to kind of pick, because right now you're playing ping pong in between the two tropes, and they don't necessarily like each other that much. Now we're going to get into world building. I do really enjoy how this story tackles a fantasy world despite everything I've said. And while I can't say it's completely original, it spices up those elements that it does have and makes them distinctly its own, which is better than I can say for a lot of fantasy stories out there. The demons look really interesting and function like actual generals that are trying to take over the human society and kingdom at large. And I really, really enjoyed that, how they're actually deployed to take specific forts, like they take the second royal capital or whatever it is at the end of the series. I really liked how they are actually trying to make moves to win the war. That's good instead of just mindlessly marching. Bujum is an excellent example of how to make a unique demon within his world and therefore enhance the world building by showing you the capabilities that some demons can have, right? He is a great tool to further expand the rest of the demon army in a way that is both unique to his story and makes it interesting for viewers to watch how he progresses and grows as the main cast does as well. Also, another element of the world building that I thoroughly enjoyed was how the heroes' backstory, where they kind of become a criminal, each adds a little secret to undiscovering the mysteries within their kingdom in a way that is both easy to understand for the audience and captivating as you get to witness their trial. And even though the disconnect between the church and military is something that usually happens in these sort of stories, it is still a good wrinkle to throw into the story that will have an amazing payoff later. So I really enjoyed the world building that this story is doing. Definitely, I can say without a doubt, it is sentenced to be a hero's world, and therefore I will give it the 4 out of 4 points for that category. Finally, we're going to go on into the ending and talk about how this season had not just one, but 3 cliffhangers wildly. It was the Bujum fight, which was a great place to end off with, saying he'll need a lot more human blood to win that fight, which I personally enjoyed because I don't know how he's going to get much more human blood. I'm kind of interested to see. And I'm very excited to see his return to the series, I hope in the next season. Rhino's big reveal as a Demon Lord was also an amazing cliffhanger as it kind of rewarded the strange air around him when you first get to meet him. And it also presents kind of a question mark within the hero unit of, is he always just going to want to kill his own kind? Or is he going to kind of betray the group at some point? Good tension to have within the story. And of course, Kivia killing Marlene and becoming a hero was amazing. I truly could not have asked for a better place to end off Season 1. While I certainly have some problems with how unfocused the tone of the series feels like it is at times, I think this is a solid start to what could be a real standout series going into the future, and therefore I will give it the illustrious score of 16.5 out of 20. I'm excited for season 2, and I hope to see all of you there. So, what'd you think? Was I right on the money? Was I a little bit off? Would you have done anything differently, or do you just want to agree with the king? I can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye!